Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Zach, and my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo, coming off a tough loss last night against the Kansas City Chiefs. We have a couple talking points today, ranging from Joe Judge's comments about the headsets and his timeout situation, his decision-making, to we want to talk about a little bit of draft stuff. Giants have two first-round picks, right? Right now, they have the 5th overall pick and the 11th overall pick, the 11th being the Chicago Bears pick. And Chicago has the 6th toughest schedule the rest of the way in terms of win percentage of their opponents. So that's pretty good for the Giants, knowing that they'll probably end up with 2 first-round picks. But where do they go with those 2 first-round picks? What players should they be looking at? What position should they be looking at? We're going to take a kind of a previewed approach to that right now. And at this point in the season, we're kind of like, blow it up or just, I guess I don't even know. I guess it's really the only is one decision, just blow it up. We saw a picture of John Mara talking to Louis Riddick last night at the Chiefs game. Of course, he works for ESPN. I do not like that move entirely. I think there's a lot of other guys who would be a better fit and with more experience, especially with winning teams, that I think would be better suited for the Giants position if they do elect to fire Dave Gettleman. I think they should 100% be doing that because I don't trust the guy for shit to draft any longer for the Giants. His first round picks have been decent, but basically everything after that has been an absolute crapshoot. He spent 3rd-round picks on Ocean Eximinus and Lorenzo Carter, neither of which have been good players, neither of which have contributed pretty much at anything. Ocean Eximinus had the offside last night on the Darnay Holmes interception, wiped away a win for the Giants, essentially, in great field position to close out the game. So the Giants just keep biting themselves in the butt, and a lot of these draft picks just aren't panning out, Anthony. But I do want to start out with Joe Judge and his comments about the headset yesterday, what we think about it. We'll talk about that shortly because I know it's not much to go into, but the NFL did have a comment coming back at him saying that, we don't know what you're talking about for the most part. We don't really know. Nobody communicated this issue to us, so we'll talk about that for a moment. Before we do that, how you doing today, my friend?
Not doing so well, okay? Coming off of a big Giants loss, a big Giants blunder, a giant blunder. I mean, that was, a really close game. I think that the Giants played probably as well as they could have, but at the end of the day, they did kind of give the game away. They had it. They had a lead in the 4th quarter. They squandered it. They lost the game. Miscues, penalties, communication problems on the sideline, apparently. All that just adds up into being a loss for the Giants once again. Getting used to losing, numb to it at this point, as many of you are as well. But it's not something that I'm happy about. It sucks. And I'm not happy that here, November 2nd, I have to be discussing what are the Giants doing in the draft all the way over in April, right? That's just not fun. That's not exciting. My mindset shouldn't be in April. It should be into Sunday. We've got big games coming up, the Raiders, bye week, Bucks. But unfortunately, in my head, and all of your heads probably too, those are just L's, big L's on the schedule. We already feel and know that those are going to be losses. So it's time to just look ahead, right? We're going to be eliminated from the playoffs within the next 5 weeks, most likely. Giants might not even pick up a win in the next 5 weeks. There's a pretty tough schedule ahead for New York. So just looking way further ahead, out into 2022, thinking about the combine, the draft, and free agency, everything like that. That's really where the main focus for Giants fans are going to be for the rest of the season. Of course, as Alex mentioned, John Mara was on the sideline talking to Louis Riddick. They do know each other. Louis Riddick did interview for the Giants general manager job in 2018 before Dave Gettleman was ultimately hired. That was a decision that many Giants fans now believe was a horrible decision to make. Not that everybody's on board with Louis Riddick just yet, but he does seem to be the consensus fan favorite for the general manager position. I'm not so sure about that, but he does seem to be the fan favorite. So that's going to be interesting going forward. Of course, Giants need to make a change of general manager, need to start focusing their assets towards the 2022 NFL draft because that's going to be the big one to see if the Giants can finally turn things around next season.
Yep, and talking about GMs, because I think we're going to be looking for a new one pretty soon, there are 2 things I have in mind here. One of them is a GM prospect who Anthony is going to be starting a really cool series about general managers and who would be the best suited for taking over this Giants team. That's going to be an awesome series. I'm really excited to tune into that as well as you guys. There's one guy I have in mind who I really like. And the second thing is, what will the GM say to John Mara when he walks into that interview, when he walks in as a prospective GM and he says, I don't want all the baggage that comes with this organization, right? So the first part is, if I'm a GM going into the room, I'm saying to him, I don't want Joe Judge. I don't want Jason freaking Garrett. I want my own coaches, and I can deal with the players. The Giants don't have terrible players by any means, right? He knows Logan, the guy who I have in mind knows Logan Ryan. He knows Adoree Jackson, but a Tennessee guy right? The Tennessee Titans are 6-2. They've turned their season around entirely. Monty Osenfort, he's their head and director of player evaluation. He has built a fundamentally strong team in Tennessee. Their defense is stepping up. Their offense is playing well with Ryan Tannehill, who, by the way, is not an elite quarterback by any means, yet they are winning with him, right? You can win with slightly above average quarterbacks in the NFL. It is very clear. And they're doing it with a strong running game, which is quite the opposite of what the NFL is right now. So they're actually kind of doing it despite all the modern trends. Monty Osenfort, he's gotten some just fantastic and phenomenal players over there who play hard. And I really think that maybe he'd be a solid option for the Giants to consider. And I know Anthony will be looking into him as well. But if I'm him and I'm walking into the office for the general manager job of the Giants, I'm saying, I don't want the coaching staff. I want to bring in my own guys. I want this to be my team. I can deal with some of the players, right? I can deal with some of the players. And I want the draft picks to be my decision. I don't want to have anybody else that I don't know, that I don't trust, having input in these decisions, especially Chris Mara, especially that scumbag Chris Mara. He just pisses me off. I don't know. He's probably a decent guy. But end of the day, he's really helped drive this team into the ground. Prospective GM coming in here, you got to be, having your own guns. You can't come in here and just basically lay down for John Mara and say, I'll do whatever you tell me, just so you give me the job. They need to have some control. And Dave Gettleman, he's got to go, man. It's time. 4 seasons. We're staring down the barrel of another losing year with 2-6. We've started the first 7 games of every season up to this point, with the highest being a 2-6 record, which is absolutely abysmal and embarrassing. Now, the Giants have 2 first-round picks, right? Where do we go with those 2 first-round picks if you're a new GM, right? You're looking at this team. There's not that many good quarterbacks in this draft class that say this guy can come in, start immediately, and turn this thing around. They've invested too much money in the team already to hit the rebuild button at this point in time, right? I think they're probably going to end up sticking with Daniel Jones another year. I think another GM comes in here like Monty Osenfort and says, we won with Ryan Tannehill, we can win with Daniel Jones. And I truly believe that. I know a lot of people are blaming him for yesterday's performance, and I think that he had a couple mistakes, he had a couple bad throws. But when your offensive line is Swiss cheese, all of your receivers are down. Evan Ingram looks basically non-existent except for that one touchdown catch. There's a lot of blame to go around. There's a lot of excuses to go around, but at the end of the day, it's a team effort. They're all playing bad, right? Daniel Jones is part of that equation. He's not playing the best football. We saw him play a great game against the Saints with good protection and his weapons all on the field. And I think that was a big difference maker for him. We saw a really competent player there. And if you bring in a Monty Osenfort, built a good offensive line, built a good foundation in reserves and depth pieces that they can sustain injuries if need be. So I think if you're a GM, you're coming in here saying, I have 2 first-round picks. Where are we going with those? They're probably going to be top 10 picks, Anthony. If you're looking at it, what is your priority position right now? Is it edge rusher, offensive line? I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, so I have 2 priority positions. Number 1, offensive line, particularly interior offensive line. I think that's been the real struggle for the Giants this year. I think that they've gotten really good play out of Andrew Thomas when he's healthy, decent enough play out of Matt Parrott when they needed him to play. Obviously, Nate Solder has been a turnstile. He's been a real problem all season long, but it's been the Will Hernandez, the left guard, the rotating, revolving door at left guard, and of course, Billy Price not playing well at center. Those 3 in the middle have been the real problem for the Giants' offensive line, in my opinion, and that's something that the Giants just absolutely need to shore up. Of course, number 1 name that everybody wants the Giants to target, I'm sure, is going to be Tyler Lindenbaum out of Iowa. Last time the Giants had an opportunity to draft an offensive tackle out of Iowa, or an offensive lineman out of Iowa, rather, it was tackle Tristan Wirfs. He went over to the Buccaneers, was nearly an all-pro in his rookie season, and he has a very bright, promising future ahead of him. He has a very similar playing style to Tyler Lindenbaum. They're both super athletic offensive linemen that are just great in those power gap schemes where the offensive linemen just get out in front as pulling lead blockers and they make those plays. They're both super, super athletic. Tyler Lindenbaum has some scary good tape out there. If you go ahead, get an early start on draft prospects and watching film on them, Tyler Lindenbaum is a freaking monster. And if the Giants are able to land him, he's going to shore up at least one position on their offensive line. Some people are saying he might be the best offensive guard / interior offensive lineman to come out since Quentin Nelson. So that's a big name that I'm targeting for sure. Interior offensive line as a position is a huge target for me. Secondary offensive tackle is a huge position for me because Evan Neal is coming out, a few other big names. There's a lot of good offensive line talent coming out this year. This needs to be the year that the Giants prioritize it. I would be completely okay with spending both of those first round picks on the offensive line. Just shore it up for the long term. You've got Andrew Thomas, a young player, and then 2 first-round picks in the 2022 NFL Draft, also dedicated to the offensive line. Now, that's a really good way to turn things around on the offensive line and really put out a great foundation for your offense going forward. Now I'll move away from the offensive line. The other position, yes, Alex, you mentioned it. Pass rusher, edge rusher. Of course, the Kayvon Thibodeaux of the world were all like, oh, we want Kayvon Thibodeaux. I'm sorry, guys, but the Giants just probably are not going to get Kayvon Thibodeaux. I think he's going in the top 3. And as bad as the Giants are, they're not a top 3 team. They're not that bad, and neither are the Bears. So I don't see that being a realistic possibility unless the Giants were to package both of those first-round picks and move up to get Kayvon Thibodeaux. Rather, they're going to be looking at that second tier of edge rushers. Of course, Kayvon Thibodeaux is number 1 in a tier of his own, similar to how Chase Young was the season that he came out, or the draft class that he came out in. But that tier 2, there's a bunch of really good edge rushers coming out this year. There's a guy out of Michigan. I'm forgetting his name. I think it's Hutchinson. There's a few other guys who have been linked to the Giants in mock drafts as well. So edge rusher being the secondary position that I'm taking a look at. Offensive line number 1, edge rusher number 2. Those have to be the 2 main priorities for the Giants in this year's draft class. And really, when you watch this team for the first 8 weeks of the season, and you're going to watch it for the second 8 weeks of the season, you're going to see 2 glaring issues on this team week after week like we have for the first half of the year. The offensive line has been a glaring issue the entire season. Obviously, depth has been another one, but that's a whole GM discussion. That's really on the general manager not providing the team with enough depth. But the other main weakness, the main kryptonite of the Giants, if you're going offensive line. Defensive, pass rush. It sucks. I mean, they get some push from Leonard Williams here and there. He's actually, in my opinion, playing a pretty good year. But I mean, maybe not up to his contract, but he is having a good season. And then Azeez Ojulari looks like a promising young player that's he's just not there yet. And they need more talent around him.
21.
He's not physically there. Exactly. He's a kid. He's literally my age, right?
He's a year and a half younger than Kadarius
You expect
Toney.
me to go? You want me to go out there and start pass rushing? I can't do that. Of course, he can. He's far more athletic and more gifted physically than I am. But still, he's a 21-year-old kid. He's a guy that I would be hanging out with on my college campus if he didn't go out of school early, pretty much, right? It's one of those people, one of those like similar age ranges to me. So no, I don't expect him to just be this dominant force just yet. Give him a few years. Yes, good building block for the Giants, but they need to pair another young stud pass rusher with him.
I think that's really the key, right? The key is giving more support to this outside linebacker core, far more than Dave Gettleman has, right? The most he's ever done for this edge rusher outside linebacker unit is invest a 50th overall pick in basically his last draft, right? Azeez Ojulari, and that a good selection, but nonetheless, far too late to solve this. I mean, we're talking about O'Shane Eximitas, Lorenzo Carter, letting Marcus Golden walk for nothing, or they trade him for a 6th-round pick. Kyler Fackrell was even better than what we have now. They just don't invest at key positions. You know what I mean? Like, they've been overinvested on the interior defensive line. They spent 25 plus million or 20 plus million per season on Leonard Williams, and they invested the 17th overall pick in Dexter Lawrence. It's just too much, man. It's too much at a spot that they really, is probably less important than the outside linebacker unit, which is really just meant, unless you have like an Aaron Donald in there, it doesn't make sense to just avoid it at all costs. Another GM could come in here and say, we want to switch up to a 4-3, but I think they're probably going to keep Patrick Graham. Whoever comes in here, I think that Patrick Graham might be the only coach that stays. I know that he's really good buddies with Joe Judge, and they're kind of a connection there, but I honestly am not entirely sure they fire him. Like, they might say we want to keep him. And if they do keep him, they're obviously going to stick with this scheme. I think the defense is getting a lot better, despite not having Blake Martinez and everything. They looked pretty good last night against Kansas City, I would say. But that's obviously a decision for the GM to make. If they do just clean house and replace the whole thing, they could change up the whole scheme. They could change it up to a 4-3. They could start going after defensive ends. But I will say, there's a couple of really, really good edge rushers in this draft class. Like you said, Anthony, though, Kayvon Thibodeaux is probably going to be out of our range right now. It's Detroit with the 1st overall pick. I think they might go with a quarterback. Houston with the 2nd overall pick. I think they might go with a quarter. I mean, they have Deshaun Watson, but who knows what's happening there. That's going to be an interesting decision for them. You have Philadelphia, who's basically going to have 3 top 10 picks, which is absurd. The NFC East might own like half the first top 10 picks, which is ridiculous. So they might go with a quarterback. Jacksonville probably will go with a pass rusher. There's also a couple of really good corners in this draft class, right? They also have Kyle Hamilton, safety out of Notre Dame. You got Andrew Booth, cornerback out of Clemson. Derek Stingley out of LSU. There's a couple of really good. Kair Alam from cornerback out of Florida. So, you never know. There could be a team that says we want corners. Jacksonville definitely needs them, so they might pass on a pass rusher, but we'll see what they like to do there. This is going to be a really interesting draft class. The Giants, if they do end up with two top 10 picks, which is very likely, I expect them to go with an edge rusher or offensive tackle immediately. Evan Neal would be my preferred pick. Like we need a pass rusher, but I think Aiden Hutchinson falls to them in maybe the 8 to 9 range or 7 to 9 range. I think he'll be there. And if he is, that guy is a monster out of Michigan. He is huge. He can stop the run. He can steal the edge. I would love to see him with the Giants. I think that he would be a awesome fit. I don't know exactly if he would fit that outside linebacker role. They might have to play a little bit of a different scheme to fit him in there. But end of the day, he's having a phenomenal season. He's strong, flexible. He's long. He can do it all. And I think he's just getting better and better and better. This is a guy that could be, one of the top pass rushers in the draft class, if not already being considered that. So we'll obviously we'll do evaluations on those guys: Aiden Hutchinson, Drake Jackson, Tyler Linderbaum. There's so many great prospects, but in my opinion and Anthony's opinion, you got to go whether it's offensive line first or offensive tackle first, and then edge rusher second. They got to be prioritized. Those two positions, if you don't go with those two guys, if they go with a freaking cornerback, or if they go with a freaking receiver or any other spot, I'm going to be very, very angry. I'd even be fine with Linderbaum, who is close to a generational prospect and guaranteed prospect as you can ask for. I know it's hard to say guaranteed. I'm not saying that he's going to be that great, but as a prospect, he's as good as it comes. So there's a lot of talent in this draft class, Anthony. Any last thoughts that you have on maybe what the Giants should do? Maybe second round. Do you think they'll go offensive guard? I think that's where they should go in the second round, just to give them a little bit more depth and a little bit more competition, because I don't trust Shane Lemieux at all.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be racking up depth. I think you can probably count on them even drafting another receiver at some point in this draft. I mean, not saying early on unless their value is really good, but they're going to add depth at receiver. They're going to add depth probably all along the offensive line, guard, center, and tackle. And they're probably going to even add depth at the interior defensive line because, quite frankly, we have said a lot about the interior defensive line, how good it's been for the Giants in recent years, but with the removal of Dalvin Tomlinson from this lineup, it's Austin Johnson and healthy scratch Danny Shelton. There is no pure, good nose tackle on this team. And behind Austin Johnson, again, healthy scratch Danny Shelton, there are no good backup interior defensive linemen for the Giants. So that's another place where they need to add depth. We can go on and on about how much depth they have to add at linebacker. And then, of course, at safety, we're starting to get stretched a little thin. We suffer one injury in Jabril Peppers, and the whole defense, I mean, yes, it played well last night, credit where it's due, but the whole defense just looks a lot more thin without Jabril Peppers in the lineup. And yes, he was playing his backup role. He was only playing about half of the snaps for the defense, but it can't be just Xavier McKinney and Logan Ryan playing all 81 snaps on the defense every single game. They're going to get burnt out and they're going to get injured. You need some decent depth back there. I mean, Julian Love had an interception. He plays well at times, and he is good depth, but just all in all for the entire team, I mean, the cornerback position, linebacker especially, interior defensive line, and of course the offensive line, there is just a top to bottom lack of depth all over this roster. That is something that you absolutely have to blame a general manager for. The general manager's job is not just to get a couple shiny cards, it's to get all the parts for the cards, right? You need to get everything in order. So he's got to get good top to bottom depth. General manager has been failing to do that for the Giants. This team is very top heavy. The top three players on the team are by far the most paid, and they get paid arguably way too much. And then everything underneath that is a bunch of young reserve guys who really shouldn't be playing nearly as much as they are. So the lack of depth has really come back to bite the Giants in many different ways. And that's something that the next general manager coming in, who I think that's almost a guarantee at this point, that a new general manager will be coming into this team. The next general manager coming in has to prioritize depth and building the roster thoroughly, filling in all those holes, even the ones that you can't see, fill them all up, because once injuries start to occur, and for the Giants, at least, you are just screwed because they have no depth. So it's something that the next GM absolutely has to fix.
Yep, straight up. And, it starts with firing Dave Gettleman. I don't trust the guy at all anymore. I have zero faith, and people that still have his back, I mean, I just don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, you're looking at a team that's starting 2-6 for the fourth consecutive season, guys. The fourth consecutive season. Injuries have taken their toll, yes, but the depth on this team, you're seeing guys go down and just nobody is there to pick up the slack. The only true good depth piece that we have is Julian Love. The pass rush, there hasn't been any injuries there except for Lorenzo Carter this past game. There's no excuse. The Giants have no pass rush, And that is because Dave Gettleman does not know how to draft outside linebackers. He does not know where the value is. He's overspending on the interior defensive line. There are no injuries there, guys. There's no way around this one. If you're a Dave Gettleman stan, there is no way around this one. He has not done well building a pass rush for the Giants. And that's just the reality of the situation, guys. So we'll be looking at more offensive linemen. We'll be looking at more pass rushers in the future. But just wanted to get an overview of what we're looking at right now. Where do the Giants sit in this draft class? Where should they be looking in the future? Maybe, and I threw out a general manager name that you guys can do some research on, and Anthony will doing a deep dive on him as well in the future. So keep an eye on that series. But make sure to hit up our sponsor below, BUSR, in the description on YouTube. Go get that free money. They're matching your bet $100. They're matching it for free, $100 to $500 free bet. It's really awesome. Sportsbook, you can play in New York. I know a lot of sportsbook don't let you play in New York, but you can go and play in New York here with BUSR. So go check that out below, and make sure to subscribe below on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. As always, my friends, we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants video.